You have a lot of hidden protectionism under the European Union, in which you have secret subsidies and not so secret barriers to entry, especially to Asian manufacturers in Europe. Pharmaceuticals is of course a very obvious example, as I think Ambassador Sharma will testify. The MEA has done an amazing amount of work in trying to open Europe to Indian pharmaceuticals without any success. For a simple reason, they want to protect their own pharmaceuticals, despite the fact that because of that, healthcare has become prohibitively expensive in Europe and America. To be frank with you, I am here in Manipal, and I would like to say very clearly, you cannot bring down the cost of healthcare in Europe and the United States without a thoroughgoing partnership with India. You have to outsource a large part of your medical activities and operations to Asia, especially to India, if you want to bring healthcare to a level that's not going to bankrupt the economies of Europe and the United States in the future. So, of course, as yet, the protectionists are still holding on to that. But again, what I'd like to say is, the entire discourse of westernization has therefore changed. Now, the globalization has therefore changed. And today the biggest enemies of globalization are not to be found in Asia, they are to be found in America and Europe. That's a very, very interesting thing that we must keep in mind, because we're talking of South Asia, Tomoko was talking of Japan and East Asia, and we've been talking of this region, this continent. So let's keep that very firmly in mind. Why? Because in the internet world, in the cable television world, I mean, I did this not only to the internet but to cable television. In my view, the real change in attitudes of people came with cable television. Of course, air travel is there, train travel is there. With all that, the world became smaller and smaller. But with cable television, the world was reduced to a television screen in your living room. It was reduced to your living room. So you could see television shows from across the world into different parts of the world. And I think it's had a very, very positive cultural effect in 2 or 3 ways. I'll give you one particular way. We had a lot of negative feelings towards, Western powers because of the old colonial reflex. We thought of them as, in a sense, people who are, in a sense, not very nice or not very friendly. But once cable television came into our homes, once we saw them at work, at play, comedies, tragedies, whatever, they came across as normal, natural people, as people in a sense like us. So that entire distance between cultures shrank as a result of cable television. I think, fortunately for us in India, we had thanks to Rajiv Gandhi and Indira Gandhi. I mean, I hate to give the Gandhis credit for anything, as those who Google my articles can tell you, but I must confess that both Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi deserved praise for bringing in cable, bringing in color television into India in a big way. And the consequence of that was, by the 1990s, by the time 1992 came, the anti-Western feeling in the mind of the Indian middle class was significantly reduced. Had it not been so significantly reduced, had the suspicions not been so significantly lowered, there could have been a much greater resistance to globalization than we actually saw in the 1990s. So in my view, and I may be totally wrong in this, there is a definite link between the fact that Narasimha Rao was able to slip through a large section of his liberalization agenda and the fact that you had a very strong spread of cable television and international cable channels. Today with the internet, that has been magnified manifold. Today with the internet, you can, if you go back to my own experiences, there's a village near Mumbai, and a friend of mine gave a village of extremely, disadvantaged people in terms of economics. And free laptops and internet connections were supplied by a friend of mine to all the youngsters in the village. There are roughly about 100 and 120 of them. And the perception was that they would start accessing it for, let's say, the farm prices or something. They all started going on Facebook and social networking sites and getting friends from across the world. So some people were horrified. What is all this? People of this economic background going on Facebook. Why not? They're the same. There is no difference. So that frankly convinced me that whether it's an Indian or somebody from Sweden, whether it's somebody from a disadvantaged economic section or a middle class, or even the basic chemistry of the human being is the same. So the great thing about globalization or cable or the internet, it has essentially taught us what, what I always kept on referring to as the horizontal view of society. A view of society that we are all basically the same. The vertical views, there are guys on top, people at the bottom, and people in between. Some people are inferior, some people are superior. The horizontal view says all of us are inferior and superior in different ways. So let's all regard ourselves as equal, different cultures, different groups, different nationalities. So that, I think, has been greatly improved by this. So what I again like to stress, the influence of internet, the influence of cable on this entire globalization debate, especially in Asia, in India, is something that we need to keep in mind. For a simple reason that today, with the fact that technology is such that you have knowledge products, which have not got any weight or mass at all, which can be transmitted by the internet across the world. You have got a large number of high-value projects that are very, very small in volume, so it can be transported across the world. It's not just heavy machines. Heavy machines are becoming less and less and less important in the total basket of production of any major economy. In that situation, you have to think not of your village, not of your district, not of your state, not your nation, not the world, but today, in the age of Mars probes, even our country is looking for a Mars probe of the universe. So that broadening of the mental horizon is taking place. In the maybe 100 years ago, we would talk about the village. Maybe 60 years ago, we talk only about the district. Maybe 30 years ago, we start talking about the state. Maybe 20 years ago, the nation. But today, you're thinking not only of this Mother Earth, but of the entire universe. So that again is a positive plus in my view, and that is there across Asia. You'll say the coverage of the internet, the coverage of broadband is expanding the frontiers of what we accept as our natural world. So let me give an example which I'm familiar with. My problem is I always only give examples that I'm familiar with. Taiwan, a very tiny little place. It's a small little island. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, it's about the size of my home state of Kerala, probably even smaller. But Taiwan has got double the foreign trade of India. Taiwan has got double the foreign exchange reserves of India. It's a complete trading giant. And for Taiwan, the world is its market. A Taiwanese company looks at the market across the world, whether it's Asia, whether it's Africa, whether it's India, whether it's Europe, they expand everywhere. So that is the focus which we need and Taiwan incidentally is a country of small business. It's a country of medium business. It's not like Korea or Japan, a country of big business. It's very much a country of small business. And for that reason, I would say in India also, we need to, more than for the Korean example of big business, of chaebols, more than zaibatsu, I hesitate to pronounce a Japanese word in the presence of Tomoko here. But we have to go to the Taiwanese example and find out methods of empowering small and medium business to compete globally the way they have done. And I think this is really happening. So, Professor Kamath was mentioning about my pessimism in my brief remarks yesterday. I'd like to say I'm not at all pessimistic about the economic situation in Asia, because I've seen young Asians, I've seen young Chinese, young Japanese, not so Indians, and I can tell you I'm very, very optimistic about the quality of these young people, the kind of aggressive attitude they have, the kind of ruthless way they have of going to compete. And these are not words which in my lexicon are negative words. I don't think aggressive or ruthless is negative unless it's in relation to something different. If you're being aggressive and ruthless in something that promotes social good, I think it's a positive plus. So I'm quite happy about that. Now, let me, I don't dare go too much beyond the subject, because I fear that Arvind is going to pull me up. So let me go back to the question of challenge of globalization in South Asia. Now, again, like I said, here, as other speakers have said very clearly, what are we talking about when we talk about a country or a region? Are we talking about government? Are we talking about business? Are we talking about civil society? Are we talking about military? Because these are all different silos in each country. You have the state, you have the military, you have business, you have civil society. And unfortunately, even today, a lot of these are functioning in silos. and they're not really interacting with each other. So, but in India, as I see it, and again I'm going into, because as I said, I'm not able to foresee the future, and I'm always envious of people who come up with papers that are lots of charts, lots of graphs, lots of citations, giving very precise analysis of the next 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, which of course goes wrong in the next 20 months. But that's a different matter. It's extremely precise and very well written, if I may say so. But in my view, in our country today, we are seeing two definite tracks. In the middle class, the lower middle class, definitely. One is what I may call the modernization track. The other is what I may call the revivalist track. Now, the modernization track is not afraid of embracing the English language, is not afraid of embracing concepts from across the world, whether it's from Europe, or from the United States, or from China, from wherever, from Japan. They're not afraid of that. They dress in the way they feel like, whether it's Indian. They don't see that the jeans is anti-Indian, or the salwar kameez, after which actually I think is Central Asian, if I may say so, is hardly Indian. So they don't, for them identity is not a dress. Identity is not the food they eat. Identity is not even the language they speak. It's something much more basic than that. And I agree with them that identity is something much more basic than dress, language, or whatever. This track is moving ahead. Tens of millions of young Indians are entering this track. But the problem is, tens of millions of young Indians are also on what I may call a revivalist track. And the revivalist track says, all that's happening for the last 50, 60, 100 years is evil. You have to go back in time. You have to go back to the codes in time, to the dress in time, to the lifestyles in time, to the mental attitudes in time. And unless you do that, you're destroying your inner essence and your inner support as a thing. Now, I am very much on the side of the modernizers in this debate. I am very much on the side of those who believe that we have to modernize, we have to change, we have to embrace. For example, the English language. If you recall, I have been very clear that India is very much the core of the Anglosphere, of the English-speaking world. I don't agree with Winston Churchill that only Canada, Australia, United States, and New Zealand are Anglosphere countries. India is very much the biggest Anglosphere country. In another 10 or 12 years, we're going to have more people speaking English in India than there are people speaking in the United States. And of course, one reason being that Spanish is growing much faster in the US than English is growing in terms of rate of growth, and now also in absolute numbers. But this debate is going on in India. And a negativism towards globalization is actually helping the revivalists in this debate. Because the perception that is created is, if you go in for modernization, you're going in for westernization, you're going for globalization. These are all horrible things. The reality is, there is no escape from going in for these things. We have to compete in the global market. We have to succeed in the global marketplace. And it's not just a marketplace of goods and commodities or services. It's a marketplace of ideas. It's a marketplace of influence. It's a marketplace of power and strength. It's a marketplace of very many different things. And each of us as societies have to compete here. For that, we have to keep modernizing. I'll go back to Japan. And the way Japan modernized itself completely, from a completely, if I may say so, feudal society, during the Meiji Restoration. It was completely transformed. The entire attitude of Japan was changed, and that launched what Japan has become, which is definitely a first world country, China, after Deng Xiaoping. You talk about the China, let us say, the early years of, I haven't been in China in the 1970s, but certainly the 1980s. When Deng Xiaoping thing was just, today China is unimaginable when compared to China of the 1980s. So that change is taking place in China as well. Yeah. So as I said, I'm just giving you some of these very broad trends, and I want to end with one little point, and that is one reason for my confidence is the fact that today civil society and business in India is also engaging extensively with the rest of the world. In the times past, it was governments and government that engaged. The Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were engaged, or different ministries. Today, civil society is engaging in large measure, especially between the United States and India, extensive networking, but is also with other countries. Business is engaging in a very, very big way. And as a consequence, I can tell you, Indian business, Indian civil society has a very good name across the world. You go to Africa, Indian business is doing an exceptionally good job. Africa has been exploited by a lot of countries. But fortunately, Indian business has got a much less nasty image than businesses from other parts of the world, is doing very well. Our people are doing exceptionally well in the Middle East. You go to Arab countries, you find they're very friendly about Indians, because they have this feeling, because the Indians who are there are the most well-behaved people. There's no problem, there's no difficulty with them. So this kind of thing, in which not only the state but non-state actors are coming into the picture, are becoming a crucial segment of this globalization mix, is one reason for optimism. Even on India-China relations, I've got optimism for a simple reason. The army in China may be negative to India, but state-owned enterprises in China, private sector in China, is telling the army, look, you chaps are spending billions in Pakistan and we're making tens of billions in India. So tell us which is a better country. A country which costs you billions of dollars, or a country from which you gain tens of billions of dollars. And I do believe this argument is going to prevail finally, and the Chinese are going to wake up to the reality that is very, very important for good geopolitical ties with India. It's very important for millions of Chinese jobs to be maintained. The same thing, in my view, will happen in Pakistan as well. If you go back to the Times of India in the mid-90s, I wrote a piece about playing the business card in Pakistan, that you starve the Punjabi general and feed the Punjabi businessman. Give the Punjabi businessman as many incentives as you can afford, and starve the general of any concession. All over the world, in India, it will finally be won by civil society, by the corporate community, by non-state actors. Given that, I feel that globalization in South Asia will have a very, very good future.